Welcome to today's Explainer. We're getting into something absolutely fascinating today, a real masterclass in a concept that honestly completely redefines how we navigate the world. We're calling it the inside-out mastery of power. We're going to fuse two massive, seemingly totally opposite ideas. On one hand, we have the deeply empathetic internal healing of the subconscious mind using neurolinguistic programming, or NLP. And on the other hand, the cold, calculated, external navigation of real-world power dynamics through a Machiavellian lens. To wield true influence out there in the world, you first have to heal in here. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever wondered why some people effortlessly attract respect, wealth, and power, while others, who, let's be real, might actually be more honest and hardworking, find themselves constantly ignored, manipulated, or trapped in repeating patterns of failure? It's a pretty harsh truth about our reality. The answer doesn't really come down to who's good or bad. It actually lies in who understands the rules of the game. Which brings us to Section 1, the illusion of real power. Let's start by totally shattering the fairy tale view of how the world operates. We are basically taught to fear visible power, right? The loud boss, the fancy title, the intimidating uniform. But honestly, that is largely an illusion. Think about it. If someone has to constantly remind you of their authority, they probably don't actually have it. True power is invisible. It operates in silence, in perfect timing, and most importantly, through dependency. The person who makes themselves utterly irreplaceable, the one everyone else has to rely on, holds the real leverage. Invisible power doesn't demand obedience, it calculates leverage. But here's where the strategy completely breaks down for most people. Imagine your ambition, that external and visible power, the wealth, the status, is a massive 1,000 kilogram weight. Now imagine your internal self-worth, maybe damaged by childhood traumas or limiting beliefs, can only lift, say, 30 kilograms. It literally doesn't matter how many external power tactics you learn. If your internal foundation is weak, you will just collapse under the weight of your own ambition. You simply cannot lift a 1,000 kilo external reality with a 30 kilo internal mindset. Make sense? Let's move right into Section 2, the law of emptiness. So before we can add new power, we absolutely have to clear out the old blockages. This brings us to a fundamental rule of both physics and the mind, the law of emptiness. Basically, two conflicting things cannot occupy the exact same space at the exact same time. If you want to manifest wealth and confidence, but your subconscious is currently filled with the echoing voice of a critical teacher or a past betrayal, well, the new growth just can't enter. You have to ask yourself a really uncomfortable question right now. What emotional baggage or what self-sabotaging patterns are you clinging to? What past traumas are taking up the space where your power should be? Moving on to Section 3, the subconscious mind and RAS. Your reticular activating system, or RAS, is essentially the bouncer for your brain. It literally decides what information gets in. To program it for success, you need an irreplaceable, deep emotional motivation, a seriously powerful why. Let's think of a mother whose child is injured. If you walked up and offered her $1 million to walk away, she wouldn't even hear you. No way. Her RAS is entirely locked onto saving her child. When you find an emotional motivation that fierce for your own goals, your brain automatically filters out all the noise and spots every single opportunity. Let's move to and see how this builds into practical application. Here is a core NLP, or neurolinguistic programming technique. First, you disassociate. You step back and watch your past mistakes like an observer in a movie theater, totally without judgment. Second, you clear the baggage. Visualize comforting your younger self behind a glass wall and genuinely forgiving the past. Third, project a bigger, bolder image of yourself into the future, actually achieving your goals. And finally, you integrate that new, powerful identity right into your present reality. It really all boils down to this. You reach where you internally belong. If you hand $1 million to someone with a poverty mindset, they're going to lose it in months because they don't internally belong in that reality. Expanding your internal self-image is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for maintaining any kind of external success. All right, Section 4, Rules of Invisible Power. Now that your internal foundation is rock solid, it's time to step out into the cold, calculated realm of strategy. The Machiavellian mindset is highly misunderstood. Actually, scratch that, it's heavily stigmatized. It's not about being evil, cruel, or deceptive. It is simply about observing the world exactly as it is, without illusion. It's acknowledging that human beings are situational. People are driven by fear, desire, ego, and perception far more often than they are driven by strict morality. Understanding this doesn't make you a bad person at all. It makes you radically aware, so you are never ever taken advantage of again. And this brilliantly illustrates the hidden psychological rules governing office politics, relationships, and society as a whole. You see, people are way more motivated to avoid losing something than they are to gain something. They are desperately hungry for approval. And their ego? Oh, that is their biggest blind spot. If you can handle their ego, you handle the person. Plus, humans follow certainty and status over pure logic. Even if you're technically wrong, if you look completely certain, people will follow you. And finally, emotions are highly contagious. If you're anxious, the whole room gets anxious. Which leads perfectly into Section 5, Emotional Detachment, your weapon. So if emotions are that contagious, how do we protect ourselves? You have to remember this absolute truth. Emotional leak is a control leak. Whenever someone triggers you, whether that's a direct insult, an unfair deadline, or just weird passive-aggressive behavior, and you react impulsively out of anger or anxiety, you have literally just handed them the remote control to your mind. You've shown them the exact buttons to press to make you dance. Reaction is weakness. Silence is power. Now, true emotional detachment isn't about becoming some cold, unfeeling robot. Not at all. It's about feeling the emotion, observing it, and consciously choosing not to let it drive your behavior. It's about creating a pause, a little space between the trigger and your response. When someone attacks you and you just respond with calm, totally unbothered silence, the power completely shifts. You retain all your leverage, and they're left standing there second-guessing themselves. Here's Section 6, Influence and Real Power. As we start bringing all these concepts together, we have to distinguish between toxic dominance and masterful leadership. Manipulation and influence might look exactly the same from the outside, but their core is entirely different. So, the crucial point is, manipulation relies on making the other person weak. It creates guilt, forces fake urgency, and hides information. Influence, on the other hand, relies on making both of you strong. It empowers choice, fosters transparency, and builds long-term respect. Manipulation might win you a quick battle, sure, but influence wins the long war. Now, how do you actually defend your newly built internal worth against these manipulators? Here is your actionable defense strategy. First, keep your distance from anyone who constantly makes you confused or doubtful. Just step back. Second, enforce your boundaries. Say no and don't endlessly debate or explain them. Third, know your own emotional hooks. If you know you're super desperate for approval, a manipulator can't use it against you because you see it coming. Fourth, always trust a person's behavior patterns over their verbal promises. And finally, stop oversharing. Silence is safety. Information is currency, so spend it wisely. Bringing this all together, external Machiavellian strategy is totally useless without the internal anchor of your self-worth. If you don't know who you are, if your internal why isn't crystal clear, the power games of the world will just chew you up and spit you out. True power isn't about crushing other people. It's about walking through a chaotic, highly manipulative world, completely aware, completely projected, and never, ever losing your core set. We'll end on this. The illusion is broken. You now understand the law of emptiness, the reprogramming of the subconscious mind, and the invisible rules that actually govern human behavior. The tools for both internal healing and external strategy are right here in front of you. So the ultimate question is yours. Will you ignore this and remain a pawn in someone else's game, or will you use this awareness to master your own reality?